Hello, everyone. I'm Jeremy Geffen. I'm the Executive and Artistic Director for Cal Performances. It's a pleasure to have you all here. I just want to say that backstage there was such a party going on that we almost didn't get this discussion happening right now. But we have been so thrilled have Angélique Kidjo here with us for the past few days, talking with students about all sorts of subjects and talking with faculty about all sorts of subjects. And I've learned many things about Angélique that I haven't known, even though we've been working together for over a decade. And behind you, you see the setup for tomorrow night's performance of Remain in Light. Obviously, songs of a few other musicians. Yeah, okay. You heard the lady, if you want to hear tomorrow night. But I wanted to introduce, well, someone who probably does not need an introduction to you is Jennifer Chayes, the Dean of Computing, Data Science, and Society, who will introduce the rest of the panelists, and then Angélique Kidjo, multi-Grammy Award winner, one of the most influential people on the planet here. So I'm getting out of the way. Please enjoy.
Okay, is this mic live? Yes, it is. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us here. And all of you know Angelique as an artist, as a musician, as a singer, as a composer. And hopefully you also know that she is an activist. And so here, she looks at what is going on in our time and what should be going on and what needs to be done. And when Angelique got here, she asked, could we bring together a group of people who work on AI and bias and understand what is happening and how it affects the theme of her place and displacement. So we are being joined by Devin Guillory, who is a student in computer science in the Berkeley AI Research Group. We are also being joined by Nika Haghtalab, who is an assistant professor in the Berkeley AI Research Group. And we are being joined by the legendary Michael Jordan.
He's not the basketball player.
He's not the basketball player, but he is more important to AI, or as important as AI as the other Mike Jordan.
I'm the Angélique Kidjo of AI.
Yes, he's the there. So we're just going to have a discussion. I've got a few questions that I'll be starting off with. At some point, around 4:30 or so, I might ask you, or you can start to do it now. They'll be handing out cards, at 4:30 or so. You can think of questions you might want to ask us, and they'll be brought up on little cards, on index cards. Okay, so here we are living in a world which is mediated by AI and AI platforms. And there are huge effects of that. We're going to talk about the ill effects and also possibly some positive effects if we seize that power. So I'm just going to start off by asking each of our four panelists, what does home, place, and displacement mean to you personally? And has that shifted in any way in response to the growth of AI-mediated platforms? You can think of whichever ones come to mind for you. So, no? Okay, so I'm going to start with Devin.
Sure. Hi. So what does home, what does place and displacement mean to me? So I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And when I think about place and displacement, I really think of culture, right? I'm from a place with a very rich culture. And it's also a place that's, somewhat in the center of this climate crisis that is going on. And so since I've been at Berkeley, one of the things I've been fortunate to do is, use some of the resources and look back at family records and thinking about place and my family's place. The small town where my mother's from, my family's been there since around 1850 or as far back as I can tell. And in this past year, the city's basically been abandoned, right? It got devastated by 2 hurricanes 15 years apart, and to the point where they can't support infrastructure anymore. And it's, a large majority of people have abandoned the chance to rebuild. And so it's, a form of displacement in a real tangible sense, and how we're navigating to new spaces. And I think, maybe not as tangible or drastic, as we have these new systems in place which affect how we consume content, how we consume culture, right? Like how music, food, kind of art, everything is mediated and presented to people. I think that there are questions around regionality and what does that mean in this current age? And are things being lost? Are things being swept away? What's being amplified? And I don't think we fully understand yet how these systems are reshaping our cultural landscape. But it is happening, and it may be happening faster or more drastically than our physical landscape is being reshaping. And so I'm really interested in kind of having that conversation around where things are.
Nika.
Yeah, this is on. Yeah. That's a great question. I've been reflecting about that for a while now, actually. And my background is that I'm Iranian, and I've called home many different countries, and somehow never went back to them. So I've lived in Iran, India, Canada, and now the US, and I still feel connected to each of them as a home. And I was trying to figure out why that might be. And I think there is 3 aspects that I could identify. The first 2 are that environment, to me, home is an environment where I feel both encouraged and supported in expressing myself. And in addition to expressing myself, to actually grow in dimensions that I want to grow. And both of these come only if I can trust the environment and the environment trusts me. So the 3 self-expression, opportunity and encouragement for growth and trust are, I think, what identifies home and a place for me. And as such, displacement to me, I think, is loss of that. And there are many different ways that one might experience that. There are some more obvious ways of taking away, a tangible physical space that you trust or you belong to or you can grow in, as I think immigrant families, refugees, asylees can really identify with. But there are also less tangible ways that you could lose this trust in the community that you're in, if the trust was never there or if the trust was eroded for other reasons, not just physically moving in space. And I think that, for me, is displacement. And in today's world, we are seeing both types. We are seeing migration, forced migration in some sense, and refugee and asylee crises more and more, as well as lack of trust in many of the systems that have been governing our lives. So that's, I think, displacement for me.
Angelique.
Me, I experience exile, and it's not pretty. Because when you leave your home, you lose your balance. And if you're not strong enough, then you can rebuild. Especially when you've been in a system where that system tried to crush the family as a place of peace, safety, and trust. And when I arrived in France in 1983, I lived with my brother. But one thing that I left with was this conversation that I have with my mom and dad. that said to me, we've given you enough strength for you to go anywhere and live. And every time I'm about to drop the ball, I'm like, the question I ask myself is, how can I use what is offered to me to better myself and to stay on both my both feet? It has been from that point on that I started rebuilding myself and seeing myself as an adult, because before I was living out with mom and dad and I didn't have to pay rent. I just eat whenever I want. I do whatever I want to do. But then I had a sense of what keeping a budget means. You have to pay your rent, most and foremost, otherwise you end up in the street. And what is important and what is not important. And when you live in displacement, in immigration, when you see so many people dying at sea in Europe today, the question we have to ask ourselves is, how can the AI help us create better environment for people to stay where they are and to rebuild their own reality in their own home? And I've had the feeling that it's not the priority of the leaders of this world. They prefer to use AI to control people than to give them freedom to be. So I need, right now, I need those three places for my stability: Benin, France, and the United States of America. And I feel good in the fact that I was able to find a way to maneuver among those three cultures without losing myself.
Mike.
So I'm very pleased to be on the stage with these folks. So I'm a professor at Berkeley for nearly 30 years, but I'm also think of myself more as a drummer than a professor. So yesterday when I got a call, we'd like for you to join Angélique Kidjo on stage at Zollerbach tomorrow. I thought, wow, they finally recognized my drumming skills, and I'm going to be on stage.
Nah, think again.
Not quite. But music is going to be part of our theme here. We're going to certainly talk about technology, and I think we're going to all agree that it's really gone awry, and we're not going to spare Mark Zuckerberg and the others. They really made a mess out of things. So we really are going to kind of say something harsh about that, I think. But Devin started this out by saying something about culture. And really, when you think about technology, you should think about the impact on culture, because culture is really the thing that's bigger than all of us, that all of us carry forward. Music is a big part of our culture. It definitely unites us. As a drummer, the word displacement actually means something to me technically. So in drum rhythms, I just wanted to acknowledge, one of the videos of Angelique, she talks about music having, all of us having come from Africa. That's true genetically, but music having come from Africa, and that's certainly true as a drummer. The beats, the clave, they all came from Africa, and they're all being spread around the world all this time. So first of all, great love and respect for the tradition that you're bringing to us at Berkeley in this period of time. In the rhythms, there's something called displacement, which is where you expect a beat to occur, a backbeat in current pop music, and it doesn't occur there. It's moved a little bit, and it sort of upsets you a little bit, that displacement. And if you're a good drummer, you want people to be a little upset by that. And you leave that sense of unease for a little while, and then you eventually return home. All right, so rhythm is very much not about progress only, it's about cyclicity and returning home. And this sense of that as underpinning and tying us all together has certainly influenced my own life. Another connection is that in 1983, I also went to Paris. And for different reasons. I wasn't in exile, but in some sense I was. I didn't feel comfortable in the United States all of the time. There was too much religion. There was too much politics. And so I went away. And so I was in Paris and feeling a little bit homesick, and so I started to go to the jazz bars. Jazz was not as popular in the US in that time, but it was very popular in Paris. And you could go and see great jazz musicians in little venues. And of course, they were all Americans. They were Black Americans. They were African Americans. And so I relearned about that part of our culture, and I became a musician again years after having had that experience. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana also, another amazing connection. And you would think that Devin and me are the most famous people ever to come out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and that would not be true. Randy Jackson, who was a friend of mine, who's one of the world's greatest bass players, came from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and he was in high school with me. And I learned some music from Randy Jackson and even played with him a bit. So as I go around the world, I travel all the time, and I've played in bands in 4 continents. But it really is what is happening to culture, and whether technology is helping or damaging culture. And culture doesn't come from top down. It's not the governments who set culture. It's all from the bottom up. It's all from the people. So part of our conversation we get to is, how does culture empower the bottom up efforts that all of us want?
So I'm going to answer my own question too, just so that I'm part of this family. I'm already part of it. I'm already part of
She's
it.
the one starting the whole thing, and then she's not a part of it.
But you see, I always feel like an outsider. Okay. So my family, my parents were from Iran, like Nika's family. My mother was Muslim. My father is still alive, and he was raised an Orthodox Jew, but he gave up that religion. So I'm officially nothing, because Judaism goes through the maternal line and Islam goes through the paternal line. So I'm officially nothing.
Somebody with no religion is okay.
It's okay. And, you know, and there was craziness as I was growing up, and I, you know, started running away from home at the age of 8, and, you know, lived for a while in Greenwich Village and dropped out of high school, which is not the typical path to becoming a dean at Berkeley. But it makes you tough. It makes you tough. And I am always trying to create home. I'm always trying to create home. Nika was part of one of my labs. I created labs and groups at Microsoft for 23 years, which I really, I tried to make them feel like home, like you were supported, like people had your backs, like you could be creative, like you could take chances, like you could take risks. You know, all the things that we're sometimes not allowed to do because there is no safe place. Home, yes, home is a safe place. Home is a safe place. And interestingly, in one of these labs, the, you know, kind of the field of fairness, accountability, transparency, and ethics in AI was born. So, you know, the name Fate came out of it. Timnit Gebru, who has lately gotten a lot of attention as she left Google, not in the way she would have expected to leave Google, was one of my postdocs. Black in AI was created in that lab with Timnit, who is now also a junior faculty member here and who would have loved to be here, but I think she's teaching or at a conference right now. And, you know, so actually, I mean, there's safety of the way we treat each other, and there's safety to ask questions, and there's safety to challenge. And, you know, now I've come to Berkeley in the last, you know, year and 9 months, and I'm trying to create this sense of home in a big division that we are creating, because I think if we have this sense of home, we create the right technology, we try to put ourselves in the places of the people who are going to be impacted by that technology. We speak truth to power. We empathize. We know we cannot walk in someone else's shoes, but we try to learn from them as much as possible what it feels to walk in those shoes. And so, you know, that's what we're building here in the new division of computing, data science, and society. And really, it's just again and again and again for me trying to create home. So, okay. So now, let's see, I've got a question. I'm going to start with Nika on this question. How do algorithmic and data-dependent recommendation systems prevalent in news media, search, hiring, marketplaces, how do these impact the integrity of social forces?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wanted to start maybe talking about actually how some of these work a little bit at a very high level abstraction, because I'm not sure if you're all familiar with them. Very simplified version of thinking about how these, imagine a system where we have people, we have books or videos, and we are trying to recommend what books people should be reading. Imagine that kind of a system. The way these systems work in the background is that they come up with some notion of similarity between people and some notion of similarity between the content. So books by the same author or in the same genre are closer to each other. And people who have similar reading histories or maybe similar education level, they live in the same place, are also closer to each other. And then they use these historical data like who purchased what book or who signed out what book from the online library, as well as these similarity measures to recommend a book to you that you're likely to want to purchase or read or they think that you're going to enjoy. And as such, we typically talk about AI and some negative societal forces that it might lead to, such as bias. And I wanted to talk about the fact that there is a natural notion of bias, which is the fact that the recommendation that's given to us is not random. And this is not a negative thing. This is a very natural thing. It's part of what makes AI systems work. But then there is a negative aspect of bias as well, which we typically mean by systematic bias, that means that either people or content that's served by these systems is not served equally well, and is usually that quality of service is correlated by a feature that it shouldn't be. Like for people, it might be correlated with features that are protected, such as race or gender. For content, it might be that newer, more risk-taking topics or books from lesser-known authors might not be as well served by this system. So that's like one example of just like what are ways that these recommender systems kind of interact and might give what kind of social forces that they might be playing with. But it's a lot more than that. Like especially you said news media, marketplaces. I think when you think about this is that AI mediated platforms are not just made for giving you a book recommendation out of the goodness of their heart. They are gaining something in the background. If you think about news recommendations, so it's not just book, content that I recommend that you should read online, or stories that I recommend. Facebook is doing that, or the platforms are doing that because they want to keep people engaged. And it might be that this wanting to keep people engaged comes at cost to the happiness of the person or productivity of the person. It might be even more than engagement, like just the fact that we are optimizing for somebody to remain in the system and click on one more link or watch one more video. We might start showing content to them that is engaging, but it's dangerous. This is why sometimes in systems we see more and more polarization, more and more content that is extreme. Again, because the system is optimizing something that it thinks it's good because it sees that I keep responding to it. I keep watching the video or reading the content that I'm suggested to. But then in the background, this is really contributing to making a society a worse place. And there are many aspects of this. So the platforms could have actually been serving a really good purpose, giving me books that I want to read that are related to my interests, giving me news pieces that really familiarize me with what's happening in the world. These are things that we need because we cannot, with such amount of content in the world, we cannot blindly search for these things. But then at the same time, if the platforms aren't designed with social benefit in mind, they could have these harms.
So I'm going to ask the rest of you if you want to just talk about the impacts that you have seen on the integrity of social forces. What has this done? What has this done around our privacy? What has it done around our freedoms? What has it done? So maybe, Angelique, what have you observed, not as an AI person, but as someone whose life is being mediated by some of this?
Well, what Anita just said is really is so true, because I'm not really a computer person, and I have a phone, and both does the same thing, because they want to keep you playing games, they want to keep you doing this and that, and step by step, what it's doing is that it's destroying people's brain. And that is dangerous not only for the people that are benefiting from them, from the technology, is damaging for the whole human race. And for me, it is very difficult to think that anyone, because the person is profiting, can allow the abuse we're seeing online. Then some people can sit behind the computer, they don't know your life, they don't know you from nowhere, and they decide to cancel you. But who gives them the right to do that? And there's no legislation to protect us from bullying online. And I think that I'm not against progress. I'm not against computer. But if we are doing such thing without controlling it, making us the criminal, and making money is not justifying that kind of crime. And somehow, I think that you guys that are here that are working in AI, we should come up to present something different that preserve our society, our culture, and have means of perhaps punishing financially people that are profiting from that. And it's crazy what's going on. And here I am a couple of years back, running away from a dictatorship, and we're living in a world where dictatorship is worship, and it's through internet and through technology that we all are becoming willingly slaves. We pay to be slaves because we are addicted to that phone, and we don't realize what it's doing to us. And the people that put those things out, their kids don't have cell phone, their kids don't have computer. And in return, I'm thinking, your kids, where are they going to live when there are only zombies around them? And that's the thing we have to ask ourselves. And it has impacted the music world. Of course, it has allowed young musicians from Africa to have a career, to make a living, and to boom, boom from the one day to the other. But does it last? Behind the likes, what is the purpose of it? You don't understand why people like something completely stupid and dangerous. It is complete. It's not simple as we think it is, because you do like it. There's always it. Every time you go online, it's not for free. And we are destroying one another. We know it. That the phone all the time in your hand is destroying your concentration. Me, I need my brain to memorize my songs. So I read books.
What I'm going to do with the next questions is I will ask Devin and Angelique, and then I will ask Mike and Angelique, if that makes sense, because I think most of you are here to hear Angelique.
No, everybody.
Everybody. So, Devin, what is the impact of AI and algorithms on the creation of art? And how do issues of bias impact artistic choice and creation?
Yeah. So I mean, and that's a question that I'd love to hear more from the artist on as well. But I think when I think about AI and its intersection with art, I think about two aspects of it, right? I think there's the component on the dissemination of art, and when we're talking about, platforms, whether this be YouTube or Spotify, and like what we're exposed to, what we're able to consume, and then on the other side, there's the component on the creation of art, whether we're thinking about things like Photoshop or various computer programs to help create beats or productionize, whether it's productionizing video content and things like that. And I think we've seen, vast improvements, from a technical perspective in all of these components, right? For whatever the stated goal is, which often is, tied to some economic incentive, we've been really good at getting closer to those goals. And so my particular area within data science is computer vision, and I think we've seen tremendous progress in creating visual art or manipulating digital media. Now we talk about deep fakes, right? Like if you look at a video, you maybe have to take a couple of glances because I can make it seem like Angelique maybe said something that she didn't in this video. And you kind of have to interrogate things more deeply. And it's one of those where I'm sure it also adds to the repertoire of tools in which artists can pull upon and maybe, speeds up some parts of the creation. But depending upon, how it's getting built, there are components that might be left off, right? Whether that's not accurately accounting for different skin tones when I'm able to generate or manipulate faces. And there's a question of, if I can't do that for darker skin tones, is that good or bad for darker skinned people, right? Like, hey, well, at least, you know that this video may be real because our technology just ignored these people, which is, a side effect of some of the, overall environments in which these things operate in. But I think, I guess I'm saying when we're digging deeper into this, I think those are some of the questions that we should be conscious of, right? And what are the unintended consequences of how we're building this, who we're building it for, what's our intention and goal, and are we asking all of the right questions? Because I think a lot of times in the creation of this, it's an insular group. We're the same people, creating this through multiple generations. And what happens? What's the overarching impact of not having enough people, enough stakeholders, I guess is the term, but not centering a diverse group of people when we're trying to improve these technologies.
Angelique.
Well, it comes to a board meeting that I had 2 days ago with the Recording Academy, and the question was diversity at every level. And they are working hard to make that a reality. Because we look at the world we live in before AI comes in. The discrimination against people of color has been there for centuries. AI is just a magnifying glass that we are putting on it. In the place of power, of decision, how many black people, men and women, are in those departments? We can quickly find out in every university. You don't have to go that much deep down into data to find out that disproportionately black people are out of it. Same in performing arts. Everywhere. We had this conversation at the beginning of the lockdown. It was a Zoom with the Manchester Theatre and Yale Theatre, and all those places. We're talking exactly about this lack of diversity always discriminate against people of color and discriminate against minorities. And the question we should ask ourselves before we start bringing AI at the forefront and trying to fix it is, why do we let that linger on for so long? And if the AI was not becoming a danger for everybody, doesn't matter the skin color you have today, AI is a liability to everyone, then suddenly we start asking the question. And I think that the way that we can use AI intelligently is also whoever is working on those to make sure not to discriminate. And if any black scientists want to be a part of this, they have to be welcome at every university. Asian group, Native Indian, everybody have to be part of this because we've been so comfortable thinking that the world that we create is working for everybody, and it's not working for everybody. And as my daughter put it, the norm is being white for a long time. And if you're not white, you don't belong. And it's becoming economically, politically, humanly impossible to continue. So for me, what I want to know about how AI can help reduce that discrimination is something that is really important to me to learn from you guys here to see how AI can help expedite the gap of diversity in every workforce across the world.
Okay, well, let me just say, I'm going to again call out Rediat Abebe, who can't be here, but she came in as a starting faculty member last January, and she really changed the diversity of the students we admitted to get PhDs in AI, in particular in computer science in general here. And she did it by working really hard and making sure that we properly evaluated people who were not the norm. Because, of course they're not going to have the normal things because they're not the norm. And they haven't, had that path. And I'm really proud of what we're doing here, but really, honestly, we absolutely need everybody at the table. There is no way that just men are going to understand what it means to be a woman, or just gender identifying are going to understand what it means to be not gender identifying, or white people are going to understand what it means to be Asian, or to be black, or to be indigenous. There is no way. And so that is part of the solution, but I think another part of the solution is seizing the power. So we come...
I have a question for you.
Yes.
How can we use AI to not discriminate against the LGBTQ? Because our government, I'm not going to name the governments, they will use AI to discriminate LGBTQ, to kill them, to put them in jail. And for me, from my observation of this world we live in, silence kill every day. So let's poke that bubble of silence scientifically and put everybody in front of their responsibilities.
I completely agree with you there. It's interesting because in some sense, marginalized groups adopt technology earlier because they're trying to survive.
Yes.
Okay?
That's why I'm talking about it.
Yes. And so, and the people who don't want them to survive also adopt technology. And I think that there's a wonderful book by a woman named Mary Gray who worked in one of my labs at Microsoft. She won a MacArthur a couple of years ago. but her earlier, but she won that for some more recent work on the gig economy and what it does to the people in the gig economy. But her first book was called Out in the Country, and it was about people coming out in rural parts of the United States where it is really hard to come out, and about LGBTQ kids realizing their own identities and connecting through social media way before other people began to do it. And so there is this double-edged sword of those who are persecuted will push the technology to the limits, will be the early adopters of it because they're trying to survive. And those who want to oppress with the centralization will be trying to use the technology to seek them out, to find them. And it's, I don't know if anybody else wants to say something about that before we go on to the last question.
Sure, I'll share a couple slides. So, yeah, I think it would be really beneficial if we could use AI. There should be a lot more work around that. I do want to, while we're on the topic, we need to talk about like preventing AI from actively harming people, yes, which, is something that is happening right now. And without getting into the technical details of how these systems work, one thing that I personally believe is that what we design and what gets out there for AI is strongly aligned with our economic interest. And unfortunately, it's often a lot more profitable to hurt people than to help. And I think as we think about how we change these systems to offer more protection and to help people, we need to kind of interrogate, the economics underpinning what we're doing, and if we can't increase the profit or the benefit in helping people, can we increase the cost on people getting hurt? And can we use mechanisms like that to help at least mitigate the harm AI is doing, and hopefully in the future get to a place where we're actively protecting each other through our work and through these technologies.
I hope so.
Thank you, Devin. Yes. It's interesting. I'm going to pose a question to Mike, but I do want to comment that Mike is really a leader in bringing together the idea of AI and markets, because, as Devin was saying, you cannot divorce the business model from the platform. It is, and so Mike often talks about the fact that we have to build market-aware AI and AI-aware markets. So I'm going to come to you now with a question, Mike, and I hope to hear a story here, actually, which is, can we turn the tables and use AI algorithms to empower artists and to create more opportunity?
So I've never called myself an AI researcher, and I've actually written articles, and there's one coming out this next Thursday with Daron Acemoglu from MIT, arguing against the Turing test and arguing against this AI buzzword. I lost that battle. The word is being used everywhere, including on this panel. It's a terrible word. It suggests we're trying to replace the intelligence of humans with computers, which we haven't done, and we're not going to do in our lifetimes, and we probably shouldn't do. All right, so just to say, one of the words we often use at Berkeley more often is data science. It's a more sober, calm word, but it's about data, and it's about finding truth, and it's about speaking truth, and that's already half of the battle. I think the most important African ever is probably Nelson Mandela, at least in my generation, who spoke truth. Yep. Just plainly spoke truth, and that was half the battle. All right? One of the things I've been interested in for a long, long time is music, and as a data scientist or statistician, not an AI researcher, I was just kind of interested in what's the phenomenon. A lot of people are listening to lots of music these days. I notice it's wonderful. Something great's happening. All right? But if you actually look at the data, it turns out probably 95% of the songs being listened by someone, say in the US, is music that was written in the last 2 years, and it was written by someone you've never heard of. It wasn't the Beatles, it wasn't Beyonce, it wasn't Kanye. Maybe it's Angelique, but it's not so clear. It's written by people. Who are these people that are writing all the music? Well, their peers are the people listening to the music. And a lot of them are kids who are 16 years old who've been empowered to pick up a laptop and make music, and they're good at it, right? And it's really good music. A lot of it's hip hop, a lot of it's Latin. Those are kind of the genres that are particularly exciting right now and creative. All right, so these kids are making the music and it's good, and so they stream it, they send it up to SoundCloud or whatever like that. At that moment, they lose control and power and value. It goes to these places.
That's it.
Those places think that the business model should always be that all content, they call it content, it's a terrible word, it's free. Because we insist that it should all be free. And we could get into that a little bit. That's part of what was broken. That's from the 30s, and radio and television had to be free. Then the search engine had to be, all websites were free, we'll serve it to you for free. And then music and other kinds of culture, that just starts to be broken at that point. Anyway, these kids put their music on SoundCloud, because what else do you do? And then these services like Spotify come along, grab the music, and send it to all of us. We listen to it a huge amount, and nothing goes back to the originator of the music, all right? 95%, so sort of everything that's happening. All right, so this is broken. Now, occasionally someone will get picked out of that stream and made to be famous and given vast amounts of money, but it's so rare that it's really just a drop in the bucket. It's all these other people who don't have a life, who don't have a career, who really don't have hope, but for a moment they make their music nonetheless. All right, so I was thinking about this for years and talked about it occasionally in public venues, and one day I got a phone call from a colleague in Silicon Valley. He says, would you like to meet Steve Stout? And I said, yeah, I vaguely know who that is. Sure, I'd be happy to meet. Steve Stout is one of the world's most impressive people. He's a producer, he's an entrepreneur, he was the manager of NAS, he worked at Sony Records, he's kind of worked on all sides. He also works at something called Translation LLC. He's a remarkable man, lives in Brooklyn. So I knew a little bit about it. I said, yeah, sure. And so I talked to a staff person and said, look, have him, he's over in San Francisco, have him come to one of the cafes downtown. It's right next to the BART. He can get off the BART. And so I go sit in the cafe, and I wait, and of course, a big stretch limo. Steve Stout is not going to come on the BART. But a big limo pulls up, and the door opens, and Steve Stout comes out, and he sits down, and we start talking. And this issue about empowerment of young musicians was the thing he wanted to talk about. And I said, well, yeah, I'm on it. He says, why can't we do the following with AI? He didn't call it AI. He called it something else, just data analysis. He says, look, one of those kids who's making enough songs that people are listening to, what they should have is they should have a dashboard at the end of the week. They should have a map of the United States. And on that map, there should be a dot every time one of their songs was listened to this past week, okay? And they see that, by God, in Sacramento, California, 20,000 hits of my music last week. I didn't know that. Why am I don't know why I'm popular. Someone liked my music, told their friends or whatever, who knows, all right? But at that moment, that kid can go to the venue owners in Sacramento and show them that map. Well, they can see the same map, right? And the venue owners say, wow, you're popular here. Why don't you come give a show in our venue? Well, also, because we know who's been listening to your music, we can actually send an advertisement to them to come between listeners and so the kid goes there and does a show and makes $20,000, all right? They do that 3 times during the year, 4 times during the year, and there's a salary, all right? That's the glimmerings of a producer-consumer relationship, an actual market, all right? And now markets are creative. That musician can now also make offers. I'll come play your wedding. You like me, I notice you're listening to my music, I'll come play your wedding, $10,000. And we start talking about money here, because money's not so bad when it's between real producers and consumers. It's bad when it goes up to Mark Zuckerberg. It's not a bad thing at this level. All right? And so if you do the little back of the envelope calculations, you can sort of say there's probably 1 million people in the United States who could be in this little economy, who could have a salary. And they're not going to become billionaires, they're not going to become millionaires, but they're going to have a life and a salary. Yeah. They're going to be able to make money, and they're going to enjoy it, doing what they most want to do. All right? And so Steve looked at me, I looked at Steve, and we said, do this thing, all right? There's now a company, and so this is Steve's baby. He's done this. He does things like this. It's called United Masters, and it's now signed up over 1 million musicians in the United States. 1 million. Many of them had contracts at other places. They quit their contracts and have joined this. Now, are they making money? Yeah, they're making money. And it's not just because of this little market thing that I said. Steve's got a bigger vision. So he went to the NBA, for example. There's music being played behind all your clips, right? And I noticed it's like Beyonce and Kanye, they got enough money, all right? What if you let my musicians be the music behind your clips? The NBA said, yeah, all right? And so now, if you go to the NBA website right now, you clip on something, you're gonna hear music, and it's gonna be these young musicians. They get paid for that. And United Masters takes a small transaction fee. There's no 80%, there's no advertising. It's an actual viable market. And Steve's now doing this for many, many other places. You think about that model, and you think about being an entrepreneur, instead of going out and creating a platform a la Zuckerberg, and creating advertising as the way to make money, and you make the money, and maybe give it to people, and you create all the havoc, but there's no incentive not to create the havoc because you're making a lot of money. You instead create this two-way market, this relationship between people, and you stand out of the way and let it happen, all right? That, to me, is so much of a better model, and it's worldwide, all right? So there's probably 1 million people in the US, but, you know, there's 1 million people in South America who could do this. Brazil alone, you know, China, Africa, you name it, all right? This, to me, is the way forward, all right? This, to me, is the way forward. It's one of the ways forward, all right? It's empowering people who do things to connect to people who want them to do those things. And you can have things going in both directions. This can be creative. You can then add bells and whistles that are AI-like. You can make it better and easier and so on, right? But we got to get off a couple things. We got to get off the heroin of thinking that everything should be free.
Yeah.
All right? That's wrong. And when they started to set up that free, that really broke things.
Yeah.
All right? And you got to start to create real governance and real mechanisms. Before I finish, there's one other little shout out I want to give, which is I've been reading this past couple of weeks a book by Daron Acemoglu and James Anderson, who he'll be a co-author of mine this next week. It's called The Narrow Corridor, and it's a beautiful read. It's about states and societies and how they developed all over the world. Certainly, there's many examples in Africa, Middle East, China, US. Authoritarianism on one axis. The other axis is where everybody's fighting with everybody and there's no state. And we know lots of failed societies like that. You know, Lebanon comes to mind. And there's this corridor, which is a diagonal. And you want to be in that. So you got to have both the state and the society kind of constraining each other and shaping each other so you start to move in this way. It's a beautiful metaphor, but it's very, very explanatory as well. Well, you need that also for technology. Technology can not just be this thing that's sitting there and there's no governance and there's no culture and it just is bits being streamed.
That's no accountability.
That's no accountability. There's no accountability. And if there's no accountability, people are going to start doing terrible things.
Yep.
All right, so I do believe there's hope, but it's not going to be easy hope. It's going to be decades of work of the younger people in the world right now to say that original vision of just bit streaming and electricity and all that, that's the wrong model. This is about culture and about people and values and ideas. This isn't just about bits and computers and algorithms.
We need rehab or free. We have to go on.
We have to get rid of the free.
Yeah, we have to go on rehab or free because there's nothing in this world that is free. My father always used to say to me, somebody come and offer you something for free, think again. There's always a price to pay down the line. And I don't, you come and offer me stuff, I'm going to thank you. But how much I'll owe you? If you say nothing, I'm like, okay, I don't want it. I don't know what I'm going to pay down the line.
Yeah, no. And it shouldn't be that we just kind of do it just as a donation. Yeah. I mean, that's good. It really should be somehow that we would do it because we'll get something out of it too. Yeah. So I do think there's hope. I just wouldn't call it AI. I'd call it something else. It's technology meets culture, or some other word. One of you invent something that's better than AI, because that's really part of the problem.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to think about it.
Maybe all semester we'll kind of think about this and come up with a better word.
You guys come up with a name. You come up with a name. I think you have the idea already.
So, is that a world you want to live in and produce art in? And how do we work together? How do the artists, the creators of music, the creators of art, the creators of, you know, the creators of many, many things that we wouldn't even identify as culture, but they're creative. You know, the creators of this. How do we bring those people together with the technologists at every table, you know, and we are thinking about how we create things that are not set to go awry. If it's free, it is set to go awry. It is not going to do what you think it's going to do. So how do we create, and this is why, you know, we're building up this whole group around looking at the market forces. So, you know, how do you as an artist and the artists you see coming up, and you think of your daughter who I hear is an author, you know, what is the kind of world that we should be creating, and how do we have the artists and the creators
I mean, the
interact?
word that Michael talked about seems really attractive to me. But how do creators know about this? I never heard about it till you talk about it. And I'm a creator.
Well, so here's what needs to happen. On all your concerts, you mention it.
Yeah, well.
No, seriously.
Tell
It's
me.
word of mouth. It's word of mouth. United Masters. Go have a look on your website.
United Masters?
United Masters.
Okay.
Steve Stout. You know.
All right.
It's just one thing, though. Maybe another way to think about it is that Steve Stout was an entrepreneur, and he did it in one particular place and time in a particular way. I hope he succeeds even more. But there should be more entrepreneurs. You know, Africa has so many, not just musicians, but it's got many budding entrepreneurs. So more support for bringing people-oriented technology into an entrepreneurial setting. Then I think you would, if somebody locally in Benin was creating this kind of thing, you would probably know about it for the artists there. And maybe that's a starting place, a foothold for some of them.
But in Africa, it's kind of complicated with those things because but most of the places they're not democracy. So if that technology exists, and if the leaders of those countries think that it is taking revenue out of their hand that they can go into the pocket, then they can close it down. That's the problem that we have in Africa, leaders that are really, I don't know the word to say that. C'est les empêcheurs de tourner en rond, comment on dit ça?
It keeps going around and around and around.
And never comes out of it. And there are so many young entrepreneurs in Africa. They build places for them, and if something comes out and start making money, it's no longer theirs. It's the same thing that happened with our resources. I mean, the resources becomes their way of making money without reinvesting the money in the society. And very much so, but I'm afraid that it might be sustainable in Africa because of the landscape that it is in there. That doesn't give you, I mean, we were talking about this morning with some young African student here. There's no infrastructure to protect the right of creators in Africa, in music. You have those society of rights, but when the rights come from all around the world, they tell you, well, we don't have the money to pay, people are working here. So the money that's supposed to go to the artists, they use it to pay their own salary. So I'm interested to find a way to make this happen in Africa. But the battle is like complicated.
So I wonder, I try to go to a technical solution. I mean, I would love a societal norm solution. I would love a regulatory solution, but I don't know what it is because dictators are not going to regulate away their own power. Quite the contrary. I wonder, we have a department here filled not only with people who do what some of them call AI, so that they get more money for doing it. But we also have people who do security and privacy and cryptography. And I wonder, and one of the things that these folks do is they keep guarding against ways to subvert things that will happen. I mean, it's a kind of, when you have crypto, you have a level of it and then it breaks and then you go, and you keep going further. But I think you're absolutely right that as we build these things, we have to think about the political landscape in which they will have to survive and thrive. And we have to make part of the design. How do we design these tools so that they can protect the creators?
But we're not so smart, I think, as we're going to be able to think that through. But I think by watching examples around the world and keeping our head in there. So China is a great example. You know, China is right now more authoritarian. We're more fascist right now. But you know, China did liberate the youth, you know, a decade or two ago. There's many, many entrepreneurs in that generation in China. There's companies all over the place, you know, small ones and all that. And then but that's this corridor thing. That's this fight back and forth. The government's too powerful there. So there's a kind of a wave of entrepreneurial enthusiasm. There's new companies created. There's a huge wave of them in the last 10 years, right? They led in payments. They led in ride share. They led in all sorts of things. And the government said, nope, too much power, and then clamped it down. But it's not a dictatorship quite in that same way as the classical African dictator. You can imagine technology getting into that system, and it has very much. Kids there feel very, very empowered with technology. And so the question starts to become whether in China, if a young musician is making a lot of money and they're being paid in Bitcoin or whatever, does that kind of go beyond the possibility of government control? Does that actually give them still a life without government control? I'm pretty sure in Africa that wouldn't even be possible. I think the dictator would simply not allow that to happen. But I think that each country's, Brazil's a very different world. They're all going to be different, you know. Maybe Iran maybe you want to speak to that, Nika.
I wanted to say that, okay, I'm going to use AI, sorry. It's just an easier way of saying 2 letters.
That's free.
I know, it's how laziness gets you. In some ways, we are talking about tools and how tools can be used, both for good and for bad. And it's not, this aspect of it is not just special about AI. You know, other tools as well have been used both for good and bad, depending on which governments they've been used by. So I think I wanted to say that we could chase this question, but I think the different way of thinking about this is that both in the design of technology, but also in our approach to society and societal interactions and just humanity, we cannot just think about we cannot just think about the tools and the technology. You know, just building a society itself, independently of technology, has issues. And it doesn't matter what tools we are talking about, what weaponry we might be talking about, or what tools that could be used both for good or bad. We need to think about the human dimension of a society. And that is a work that has to be independently done, can be helped with technology, can be helped by many other tools. But it's something that independently we need to be pushing societies to become better.
And I think I think that you know, again, I come back to what we're trying to build here, which, you know, we didn't call it just a division of computing or even a division of computing and data science. We called it computing, data science, and society, because if we're not talking to the anthropologists who understand how these things are deployed, if we're not talking to the people in our School of Social Welfare and Public Health who actually see how these things work on the ground, if we are not collaborating with them from day one, we will never build anything that will survive that deployment in the real world.
I totally agree, because it's my philosophy. Nothing is in the silo. Everything is connected. And in everything we do every day, we try to shove that way. And it always comes back and beat us in the eyes, because you can't just think that you can do this without thinking that. And I learned this in my activism when I started working in education, and I started realizing the complexity even of the political part of education, how some government can be threatened by a different education system that make the children smarter and brighter, and how they can manipulate their own education system to have the population that they can easily manipulate. That's why every time I'm somewhere doing something, I'm like, who is here doing this, that, that? And then I try to find out in the community where I am, people that can be allies of what we do, and they can be the community that knows the community, that can really be a kind of support for those young girls that I've been trying to help for so many years. And when you try to do as what you just said, the result is absolutely overwhelmingly amazing. And you see things happening, and then you go, why haven't we thought about this before? And if we can do everything in a university and link everything, because you cannot just have social science, you cannot have this. Every single person that is here is a complex being. And that complexity has to be seen in how things are done in university. And for me, sitting here with you guys is to try to understand, listening to you, how that can impact the work that I do, and how can I be a voice also for the people that are suffering from this kind of thing, that doesn't even have a way to express it. And also, how do we, step by step, by working together, change the vision of our own economy, the understanding of our economy, that is not just about profit, it's about people. And if you don't have people buying what you produce, if they don't have the means to buy what you produce, how can capitalism exist? So it's like you sitting on a branch and you cutting it. The day the branch is broken, you just fall. And having a sustainable system in place that reduce poverty around the world. But because for me as a human being, poverty is just a manifestation of our failure as a human family not to be able to understand that people don't have the same ability. We can not all be at the university. We cannot just value the people that are educated, academically educated, and think that the ones that have been to school have nothing to bring to the table. And that's why I'm so interested about what Michael is saying, what you guys are saying, to bridge those gaps. When you start having a society of people where you wake up and you say, today I am able to do this, and actually you do. What defines us is our work, what we bring to the society. When we work and we have money, we invest in our children, we women. We invest in our family, we invest in our country, we invest in many different things, and we have different ways of investment. Today we have one type of investment that is dominated by gender inequality. Men are at the top of the bucket. And it's not working anymore.
Some women have power.
Not me.
Yes, you.
Not me. And I'm born, since I was a kid, I've always been somebody that always spend my time thinking about how can we make this better for everybody. That's why I become a singer, because I'm like, I can sing to people, tell people stories, and tell each one of them that they are important, that none of us are just to be discarded. I mean, we are human beings, and even the little thing we bring to the table is part of progress. And we are lost in success story of a minority. We need to tell a success story of majority.
Wow. You know, we do have a few more minutes. Let me tell you one other story about trying to empower others with these computing platforms. So many parts of society are, you know, there is not a level playing field. And I mentioned this to you on the phone yesterday, but I'm going to say it again here. the co-founder of the Innocence Project, which works to get people off death row, came to our Berkeley Institute for Data Science and said, there's this data that the NYPD is being forced to release because there was police misconduct, right? And so it's very complex data. It's video, it's audio, it's things written on scraps of paper, it's all this stuff. And we believe that there is exonerating evidence that would get people off death row in that, but we don't have the resources to be able to find it because it's really complicated. And, you know, we look at the system of criminal justice we have here, the resources are lined up on the prosecutor side and not on the defense attorney side, you know, and they're both looking at the same body of evidence, but one has all the resources and the other has almost none of the resources.
Because prison is a business in this country.
Because prison is business, yes. And so 3 computer scientists here built a tool for the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, the most sophisticated tool that exists. It can level the playing field. And they were so excited about their ability to do this, and they work, you know, day in and day out, week in and week out with the folks in the field. They were so excited that they said, our research agenda, and they do research agendas in 5-year chunks, is to build platforms for social justice. How do we build platforms, take cases in which one side is research rich and the other side is resource poor, and how do we level that playing field so that, you know, and so one can begin to think of so many examples of this where we can create tools that level the playing field. I'm not saying that will solve all of it, but that
It will solve a lot.
It will solve a lot, and that is what I hope we are doing here in this home we are building. In this home we are building of lots of people at the table, bringing their life experience and seeing how, rather than the next fantastic startup that makes them into millionaires, they can instead create so much for people who have so little.
Yep. I say amen to that. Let's do that and do more. Let's start there, because the justice system is the last frontier of our freedom and of our democracy. And if you are able to create that, and then it can free people from death row and put in jail without being able to defend themselves. Because if you commit really a crime and they have the proof of it, it's one thing than people coming up with made-up proof just to fill the jail cell. And that, even that, in that justice system is exactly what is going on in the world at large, where that this injustice that people feel, that fuel people anger, people disbelief in the system, and how it distorts the truth. If we live in a society without trust, who are we? Where do we go? I tell you, it is amazing for me, and my anxiety about distrust is something that is wake me up in the middle of the night, because I'm a trustworthy person. I always trust people, give them the benefits of the doubt. And if I'm not able anymore to live in a society where I can trust my fellow human being, where do I go? On which planet will I live? That's why every time I'm given the opportunity to participate in anything that has to do with human rights, I do. And the documentary that I've been made about the Iranian So Today, I'm the one that sings the song that goes with that documentary. Because for me, if she's not free, I'm not free. If anyone here is victim of injustice, how can I sleep at peace? How can I call myself human being and sit tight and be quiet? I can never do that. If I witness injustice, you will kill me, but I won't shut up because my fellow human being is being brought down. I can't. I just can't. I try to think differently. I try to be indifferent. I try to say, I don't care, but I can't live with myself. I just can't. I don't have it in me to say, I don't care, it's your life, you suffering, it's your business. I can't do that. So what you are doing is giving me hope right now because I tell you, sometimes I just stay awake in my bed thinking about the contrary of what you just said. Is unbearable because it can happen to your loved one. It can happen to anyone. I have a young girl of 28 years old, and with the discrimination, every time she's out there, I'm just praying God that nothing happened to her. And it's not a life. We can't spend our life being afraid of one another. Thank you for doing what you do.
And thank you, Angelique, for all that you do, for how you care so deeply, advocate so strongly, and make music that lifts up our souls.
I try.
You succeed.
I just try.
Okay, I would like to thank our panel. First, Angelique. And then also Devin and Nika and Mike for bringing their experience.
All done, right? Then we can go and say, we've done something right today. She died, she goes see God, God exists. But leave my child out of it. I just